So good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I thought a lot about what I wanted to present for you today, just like my classmates. And I thought about my experiences and my practicum, and I felt like there's not going to be many other times that I'm going to have an audience of people, and I really wanted to do a really good job today and make you feel something. So I decided to take you on a journey with me. I also wanted to mention that I'm really proud of where I've come with public speaking. I mean, I shouldn't say this yet, but I feel like I'm a lot more comfortable standing in front of an audience right now, because I remember back in BCC in our public speaking class, one of our presentations, some of my classmates might remember, I think I cried for about 10 minutes in the corner before I started. So I haven't started crying yet, so that's a really good start. Can't promise that I'm not going to cry throughout this. So. All right, so welcome aboard, passengers. We're flying out this morning on a cool morning here in Coquitlam. The duration of this flight will be half an hour. I will be your captain. My name is Rachel Lund, and I will be guiding us safely to our destination, the land of interpreters. One of the most important things to remember on this flight is to take care of yourself. We don't have any flight attendants on board, so make sure that you take care of your mind, your body, and your soul. Make sure you eat lots of healthy snacks, drink lots of water, move your body, and if you feel overwhelmed, just lean on a friend for support. If you don't take care of yourself, how are you going to take care of your fellow passengers, right? This is not an easy trip, but your destination will be worthwhile. So, buckle up, and please have your boarding passes ready. Can I get your boarding pass, please? Actually, if you want to just check under your table, I have a boarding pass waiting for you, unless you sat in a bad spot. All right, so we're just taking off now. Hope you're all buckled in. If you'll take a moment just to look out your passenger window, first I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. So I just want you to look out your passenger window, and you're going to see where I grew up. So I grew up on Vancouver Island, and I spent the formative years in this little summer cabin. We lived off-grid, me and my two sisters, my mom and my dad. We lived in this small two-bedroom summer cabin. It did not have any electricity, no heat, no running water. And we lived in it all year round, so we had a little wood stove that kept us warm in the winter. We spent our summers playing in the river with the crayfish. We ran around the forest playing hide and seek, and we just spent a lot of time in nature. We did not go to school, and we did not socialize with the outside world. It was my dad's idea of an ideal life, away from a government that he did not believe in. It wasn't so ideal for my mom. He took his anger out on her the only way he knew how, physically. So she knew we had to get out of that situation before it got worse. So one morning she woke me up, and we left before dawn. We took the long walk down the driveway. We couldn't start the car because then my dad would know we were leaving. I was 7 years old. So we lived in a shelter a women's shelter for a month, and we had a dear family friend who set us up with an apartment, and we got on welfare. My mom was 19 when she married, so she didn't really have any employable skills. So we lived in poverty for most of my childhood, but we were not lacking in love. My mom taught me how to have boundaries and how to work hard. I started working at age 7. We lived above a preschool, and in order to save money on rent, we would go down every night and clean it. It gave me a really good work ethic. Growing up with very little made me who I am today. I learned how to cook for myself at a very young age because my mom was often working, so she couldn't make us dinner. Being raised on very little made me so resourceful and grateful for the simple things in life. So I became independent at a very young age, and when I finished high school, I decided all I wanted to do was travel. So in my early 20s, I traveled the globe, not returning to Canada for 2.5 years. So I spent 3 months in India, connecting with my inner world and discovering a spiritual side that I always knew I had. I lived in an ashram for a month with a strict schedule of meditating at 5 a.m., yoga philosophy for the rest of the day, and bed at 10. I really had some amazing breakthroughs at that time, and I began to see my life in a whole new way. Instead of always thinking about the future or living in the past, I started finding a way to live more in the present moment. India gave me a spiritual practice that I will have for the rest of my life, and I found that for myself. As I continued to travel, I only had myself to rely on. It was pretty much before smartphones, so I didn't have a cell phone, I didn't have a credit card, and it was just me. I just learned to trust that everything would be okay and go with the flow. I spent 2 years living in New Zealand and Australia, learning about new cultures, philosophies, and most of all, following my heart. So I decided what my heart wanted next was to buy a car, this little Suzuki, and drive across the country in Australia. I learned how to drive standard, and I drove 8,000 kilometers across their diverse landscape. And I went on the biggest adventure of my life. And that's for another time. That's a big story, I'll tell you later. So by the time I decided to go back to Canada, I truly found myself. The only thing that was missing was what was I going to do for the rest of my life. So I just continued living my life like I always had, listening to my heart. I always loved cooking, so I found a job working at a gluten-free bakery, and I worked there for 4.5 years, and I loved it. So yes, before I was a pilot, and soon to be assimilated into the land of interpreters, I was a baker. After working at the gluten-free bakery, I ended up working at a little cafe downtown, baking bread. I really enjoyed the art of sourdough, but I started to feel like there was more that I needed to do with my life than feed Vancouverites carbs. I get what people say about getting really thirsty up here. So I was starting to feel another shift happening in my life, and to be honest, I was ready for it. I knew it would be a long road ahead. I'd actually taken some time off to do some soul searching, and I came across Helen Keller's autobiography. The book changed my life. I read about her teacher, Anne Sullivan, and how she taught Helen, and how they became lifelong friends. I was so inspired by reading Helen's and Anne's story. It made me think, how could I could possibly influence someone's life like that? So I started doing research on the process of working with deafblind folks. I began taking night classes at Vancouver Community College while I was still working full-time. So I'd get up 5 a.m., bake all the bread, and then go to my night classes until 9:30 at night. I instantly loved it. I was amazed by the vibrant culture and fascinated by the language that was produced with the hands and not heard by the ears. I knew this was the right decision for me because, again, I felt it in my heart, and I followed. So I began at VCC in the full-time program, and the deaf world started opening up to me. I felt so grateful to be a student. Again, it had been 10 years probably since I had been a student, and I was so grateful to get to go to school every day and learn and be around these people that also wanted to learn. It was a huge shift in my life. So that brings us to our next destination, Deftopia. Thanks to Nancy for letting me use her beautiful picture. This is a land of rich culture. Here, we will be amazed at its diversity of citizens who express themselves through art, literature, visual language, poetry, and humor. Some of you are from this land and coming home. Others of us are just visiting. And some of us have been in this land for a very long time. For you experiencing Deftopia for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about this land. If you want to thrive in Deftopia, you will need to learn sign language. It's going to be a challenge for sure, but you will be amazed at how wonderful it is to use a language that is not heard with your ears, but seen with your eyes. Your hands and your eyes become a way of communicating. The language is as diverse as its people. As a frequent visitor of Deftopia, I have learned that there are dialects and different ways to produce signs, depending on which continent you're in. American Sign Language is a very complex language system. It's not a derivative of English, but since Deftopians have been submersed in English culture, there is certainly a crossover. You can create stories in the space in front of you. You can become any character in any story. You can become an inanimate object or an animal. The options are infinite, the way you can use your body and space to create stories. Luckily, we have Christian Vasquez on board, who is a visual vernacular genius, and he can show you how to become an inanimate object. I tried to be a soup can once. Didn't go very well. I'm still working on it. You also might meet some folks here that communicate by touch as well. I remember the first time I experienced communicating through touch. I was in awe of how we can just chat by feeling the shapes of my hands moving. It was really inspiring. If you're new to the land of Deftopia and the visual language, you will be amazed at how the flick of an eyebrow or a furrow of the eyes can change a whole concept that is communicated. Now, this land may be beautiful and intriguing, but there are also intruders. People who visit here who don't want to learn the language and who don't understand the culture. Deftopians have had to fight for their language and their culture because many others come to this land and they thought they knew better, and they tried to force them to give up their language and their culture. These people might have been full of fear of what was different, and Deftopians fought back to preserve their natural abilities to use a visual language and share their rich culture with each other. Even with all the paternalizing from other cultures, they were steadfast in their beliefs, fought for their people, and have a rich language and history. With many intruders trying to change their ways, they still welcome us into their land. As a visitor, we must be open to how we can continue to understand our friends in Deftopias. We can speak up when we see marginalization, and intruders who don't understand the Deftopian way. As a friend of Deftopian people, we can continue to understand their culture and their ways by embracing their stories and reflecting on our own stories that we grew up with. Before Deftopia existed, many Deftopians were alone in their uniqueness. They grew up with families who often didn't understand them and didn't speak their language. Often this gave these folks struggles from the start. Many of them felt alone and misunderstood. Growing up with a family who didn't use the same language as them ended up giving them a language delay. Many of their families and educators tried to force Deftopians to assimilate and use their spoken language. Even the medical system failed them and encouraged assimilation instead of embracing their uniqueness. The medical system encouraged Deftopians to get surgery and learn how to use the spoken language, and often created language deprivation. Without access to their natural language, delays in other parts of their lives happen as well, and with this creates a cycle of systemic oppression. As visitors to this unique land, let's make sure we understand the history and the culture before we repeat any of this history. In order to help us, we're going to take a little pit stop to Ethics Island. In order to make it in the land of interpreters, we have to check our moral compass here on Ethics Island. This is not a vacation. This is a place to do the inner work and see what values align with you. Because we're going to use those as our guiding principles throughout our time here in Interpreter World. The land of interpreters is a place where we're going to come face to face with dilemmas daily. How are we going to know to make how are we going to make ethical decisions without knowing our own values, as well as the ethical code of the land that we're flying into? I've had a lot of time to reflect on my values, and that reflection really helps me understand myself. My values are honesty, autonomy, relationships, equality, and self-care. My mom always taught me that if I didn't know how to handle a dilemma, she said to always listen to my heart and be honest. I've always carried that with me. If I ever question my decisions, I know that if I'm completely true to myself and authentic, then I made the right choice. I believe in equality and that everybody deserves an equal chance at this life. I believe in autonomy. Without our independence, what kind of life do we live? And if we take that from another, how can we expect autonomy for ourselves? I believe in fostering relationships and allowing space for new ones. I believe that we must take care of ourselves, our mind, body, and soul. Fueling our body with plenty of plants, making our own food from scratch, and avoiding highly processed foods with lots of sugar and salt. Moving our bodies every day, keep it agile so it's going to serve us for the rest of our lives. And taking time to meditate so we can find spaciousness in our busy minds. And also reminding ourselves to be grateful for all the blessings in our lives